Welcome all to the live info session. Today is June 25th, 2028 for the B.R.A.I.N.S technique. I am glad you are here. Thank you for joining on a Saturday morning. I will be presenting with a slide presentation for a few minutes, and then I'll be answering questions and also be giving a live demo. As you are watching this, if there's something that you want to work on and have not used the B.R.A.I.N.S technique before, I'll be asking for a volunteer. And we can do a live session, which usually takes anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. My name is Whitney Nattiello, and I'm a licensed acupuncturist and certified brain health professional and trainer through the A.I.N.S Clinic. Dr. Daniel A.I.N.S has practices throughout the United States, and he works with SPECT scans, which is a type of brain scan that you can look at blood flow in the brain. And I'll be showing you a brain scan during the presentation so you can kind of see what that is. And it gives us really good information of how the brain reacts to stress and trauma. And that's what we're here for, is to help you with stress and trauma. What is the cost of stress and trauma? We know the world is stressful right now, and we can have emotional reactivity, we can have burnout. If we have acute stressors and they are not tended to right away, they can eventually turn into post-traumatic stress disorder in our brain, and then we will continue to have all sorts of triggers from that original stressor. Stress, we know, is the leading cause of illness. And chronic illness is that we keep getting triggered. The illness goes on and on. I practice Chinese medicine. I work with neuroscience. I work with Germanic healing knowledge as well. I look at illness from a lot of different perspectives. And we know that caregivers, both professional caregivers and unpaid caregivers, when we are caring for our parents and our children, and as a teacher, as a caregiver, that our caregivers are at very high risk for burnout and compassion fatigue and exhaustion. The B.R.A.I.N.S technique can help so much, both for that caregiver and for the person that they're caring for, to help mitigate the stress. Stress also impacts the brain function. It impacts decision making, relationships, and overall well-being, mental and behavioral health as well. We know stress affects us physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and our brains are programmed to react as if when we are in nature and we are running from a tiger. And now we are no longer running from tigers, but our brain thinks that we are. When something happens in our lives, when somebody gives us a look that reminds us of a look from childhood that we're not even consciously aware of, or we get into an argument with somebody, or we have anxiety or panic about something, that sends the same signal, and the same thing happens to our body and our brain as if we are running from a tiger. We are only meant to be in that stressed out state for minutes at a time, not hours, days, weeks, months, decades, which is what a lot of us have been. And it is so crucial for our health to downgrade and mitigate that as quickly as possible. My biggest vision is that if we can handle things as they come up, even seemingly minor things of stress and anxiety and panic, if we can handle them in the moment or within a couple hours or day or two, then we are in prevention mode. Then we don't need to go into post-traumatic stress or go into a physical illness. We can catch it at the moment that it's happening. And that's what the B.R.A.I.N.S technique is for. You can use it in that moment up until 4 months of an event happening. And then it turns into post-traumatic stress in your brain. I would not recommend the B.R.A.I.N.S technique for post-traumatic stress. I would recommend it to prevent post-traumatic stress from starting. How do we stop stress and trauma from taking over? We use the B.R.A.I.N.S technique. It's a solution. It's very quick. It's very easy. Once you learn it, you will have it for the rest of your life. It is a skill, and there is an art to it, and there's a mechanical piece that's quite easy to learn. There is an art to understanding how it works. So what is the B.R.A.I.N.S technique? It is a neuroscience-backed tool to regulate the nervous system and resolve stress at its root. It combines neuroscience, and I'm going to show you some brain scans here in a minute, trauma psychology of what we know of what happens in the physical body, as well as in the brain, and health research. It resolves the stressor immediately as soon as it happens. Here's the thing, your psyche registers a threat, and it is your psyche that has the solution. As soon as a threat exposes itself to us, as soon as our brain registers that, at the same time, our brain comes up with the solution right away. But the problem is that we feel the threat and we go, oh my God, there's a threat. Oh my God, there's a threat. Oh my God, there's a threat. And we are not focused on any possibilities or potentials. We don't have that capacity because we are focused on the problem. And what the B.R.A.I.N.S technique does beautifully is it helps engage blood flow in the brain in a way that we can find solutions to the problem or to the stressor. So how does it work? This is a picture of the general picture to show what happens with stress in the brain. On the right-hand side, the red area, and that is typically in the amygdala part of the brain, and it is in the hypothalamus, and the blood flow gets pools there and has more blood flow in those areas. When we are not stressed, we have blood flow available in all parts of our brain. That means that we have access to all parts of our brain. The B.R.A.I.N.S technique enhances the blood flow throughout the entire brain to boost creative problem solving and mitigate negative stress impact. This is grounded in globally sound research about bilateral stimulation, which is part of what the B.R.A.I.N.S technique uses. And that research is done by therapists who are trained in eye movement desensitization reprocessing, which is a method to use for post-traumatic stress. You may have heard of it. They use it a lot with vets and with people who have post-traumatic stress to accelerate the trauma processing. But we want to get to the point where people don't have post-traumatic stress. We want to deal with it when they're in the acute stress phase before it gets there. Here is a SPECT scan. And just to give you orientation, on the left-hand side, you will see the active view before the treatment. This is a person that was treated with EMDR using bilateral stimulation, which is what the B.R.A.I.N.S technique utilizes, is the bilateral stimulation. But we use it in a different pacing and format in order to deal with acute stress versus post-traumatic stress. This brain that you're looking at here, you are looking at it from the camera is taking a picture like under your jaw. It's the underside of the brain. And the blue area is normal blood flow. And the red area means that the blood flow is stuck and in certain areas of the brain. It means the red area is that it's hyperactive in certain areas of the brain. In this particular brain, this is a first responder's brain who has post-traumatic stress disorder. And the stuck area here is that they are reliving the event over and over again. This area here is the basal ganglia. This is the anterior cingulate gyrus here in the center line. And what that means is that their gear shifter is stuck. That means they will think about the conversation or the event over and over again. I don't know if you've ever had that experience where you have a conversation and then you think about it over and over again and it wakes you up in the middle of the night and you think, oh, I should have said this or I should have done that. That's when there is too much blood flow in this cingulate gyrus. That means your gear shifter in your brain is stuck and it can't move to the next event or the next person that walks into the room. You can't be present. It's hard for that person to be present. This blood flow here is also stuck in the deep limbic system, which means their emotions, they can feel very intense emotions. They can be really sad. They can be really anxious. And what happens here is that if the blood is stuck and overactive in the cingulate gyrus, which is down the center line of the brain, and in the deep limbic system at the same time, that means that person can be stuck in depression or they can be stuck in anxiety. And then anything that comes into their environment, they have a really hard time handling because they are dealing with all of these past things that their brain keeps looping. They're just on a hamster wheel in their brain. The other area here is the cerebellum that is hyperactive. And this is the CPU unit of your brain. So every thought, every emotion actually goes through the cerebellum. So the cerebellum, a lot of times people think of the cerebellum is where I keep my balance. And it is your physical balance, but it is also your emotional balance as well. So when this first responder who has post-traumatic stress disorder goes through the bilateral stimulation, their brain changes, their blood flow changes. And so now they have access to all of their brain, not just the areas that are highlighted in red on the left-hand side here. Now their entire brain is available for use on a daily basis. That means they can be a better professional, a better mother, father, sister, brother, allows the person to be present instead of looping in all of these forward thinking fears and past thinking fears of things that have happened in the past. Now they have access to their prefrontal cortex, which is here in the front. And their prefrontal cortex is our executive manager of our life. This allows us to be able to judge something as this is dangerous, this is not dangerous, this is good for me, this is bad for me. It allows access to that part of the brain. This part of the brain is super involved in decision making and the capacity to see different potentials and possibilities and then make a good decision. Not an impulsive decision, but a good decision. This person is no longer riddled with anxiety. Their blood flow is not stuck there. There is a little bit here in their deep limbic system, which means that they're going to feel things, and emotions are good. They're our GPS system. They tell us if we want to engage in the environment or not. It's really good information. But the problem with emotion that people get stuck on is they feel something and then they don't want to feel it because it's too intense, it's too sad, it's too anxiety producing, it's too negative, whatever it is, and they want to move it. And with the B.R.A.I.N.S technique, you can move it. And then here you can see you do actually want some red area here for the cerebellum because it is such an integral part of everything that happens in the brain. So you can see this is a huge difference using bilateral stimulation. This is in post-traumatic stress disorder to give you an example of what is happening in the brain using the B.R.A.I.N.S technique. When we use the B.R.A.I.N.S technique, as things come up, we can be resourced and calm and adaptable and resilient. The benefits of the B.R.A.I.N.S technique, there's 12 different ways to use the technique. There's a lot of benefits. The immediate ones is immediate stress relief. You will feel better within 5 to 10 minutes. This will prevent illness and post-traumatic stress disorder. This will prevent you from getting into that brain on the left that we just saw that was all red. It enhances brain function and creativity. I've used it with people who have short-term memory issues, and it's typically due to stress and overwhelm. And once you remove the stress and overwhelm off of the brain's plate, you mitigate that, and you're actually now enhancing your brain function and creativity. This improves relationships and communication because now you have access to your entire brain. And it helps to build long-term resilience and adaptability so that when something stressful does come, your system is way more flexible and adaptable to handle whatever comes up. The practical uses for everybody is that we can now, with the B.R.A.I.N.S technique, we can now navigate emotionally charged situations. A sudden phone call of somebody's in the hospital or an accident or a loss. We can handle a car accident. We can handle a hurricane. We can handle a triggered situation. We can handle a stressful situation with a neighbor or a boss or a spouse or a child. We now have a tool that we can use immediately. This also is really good for mitigating pain. What happens with pain is there is a circuit gets created in the brain to help protect that area of the body. For example, you have hip pain and your hip is hurting and the pain is telling you not to move in certain movements. But what happens with pain after we've had it for a while is it wears us down, and then we get stressed about having the pain. Now we not only have the pain, but we have the stress about having the pain. With the B.R.A.I.N.S technique, you can actually mitigate having that stress about the pain so that now you can really hone in and figure out what needs to be done for the original pain. It enhances decision making. When we are so flooded with chemicals and neurotransmitters of feeling victim or anxious or panic or grief, it is very difficult for us to make decisions. And when we clear out, when we have blood flow accessible to all areas of the brain, we can then make really good decisions. We can also use it to help support others in high stress moments. If you're visiting somebody in the hospital, you can help them. If you have a pet, you can actually use it for our beloved furry animals, for our pets as well. It can also help with preventing burnout if you're a caregiver or a practitioner or a parent or a therapist or a coach or a teacher, and help to maintain emotional balance. And it can help, like I said, with decision making and creativity. The practical uses for the B.R.A.I.N.S technique, if you're a caregiver, and I use that term really broadly. A caregiver is a professional caregiver, a practitioner. It could be anything from a CNA to a nurse to a acupuncturist to a chiropractor, any type of professional caregiver or personal caregiver if you're taking care of your elderly parents or a child or a sibling. And if you're a coach or a therapist, I have a lot of coaches and therapists that use this before, during, and between sessions that use the B.R.A.I.N.S technique to help their system, to help their clients get better results. If a client is stuck in fight, or freeze, you can use the B.R.A.I.N.S technique, and it's so fast, 5 to 10 minutes. It'll regulate their nervous system, and then they'll have their brain online so you can use whatever modality you use. It helps you to become even more efficient and effective in your profession. It can support you and it can support a client when they're triggered. It can reframe limiting beliefs. And like I said, I have a lot of coaches and therapists that will use it before a session. Somebody will come in and they will have just had an argument with a spouse, and they're all jacked up and their emotions are running and they're anxious and they're talking really fast. And in order to have the session be as effective as you want it to be, you use the B.R.A.I.N.S technique, and in 5 to 10 minutes, you help regulate their system and get their blood flow back online in their brain. And then they are able to be totally present in the session and have new creative ideas and solutions to whatever you all are working on. It regulates the autonomic nervous system for immediate relief. It is based in neuroscience, and it integrates the right and left brain for creative solutions. That is why the B.R.A.I.N.S technique works so beautifully and so quickly. A couple stories that I wanted to share with you today. I have a client who is a mother, and she took a job due to financial reasons, and she was stressed about the type of work that she was doing. And she took the job knowing, I have to do this job and I'm doing it to take care of my family. She started going to work and she hated the work, and she was having a really hard time with it. Then she was starting to have anxiety and panic and sleepless nights the night before she would go into work. She was doing it as a part-time job. She was working 3 days a week. Then she started having anxiety, panic, and sleepless nights the night before and during the shift. And then it was starting to bleeding into her whole life. Then she was having anxiety and panic just thinking about having to go to work a couple days later. It was really starting to affect her quality of life. We did the brains technique session, and after about 4 or 5 minutes, all of a sudden she started seeing all of the overwhelm in three different containers. And everything just started separating, and she started having more capacity to see possibilities and potentials. She realized that part of what was causing her anxiety was she felt trapped in the job. Now, she made the decision to take the job, but at some point, when she was at the job itself doing something that she didn't like, she felt trapped and she felt stuck and she felt like, oh my God, I'm going to die here. When we worked with the brains technique, she was able to see, oh, she's not really trapped. She could quit at the end of the season, or she could quit at the end of the year if she makes enough money, or she could quit today. And what she realized as she went through the process is that she had agency and she had the capacity to make a different decision. Then she was thinking to herself as she was going through the brains technique, do I want to stay at this job? Is it worth it? And she thought, yeah, I do want to I have a financial goal and I want to stay with the job. And so she decided to stay with the job and during the session, and there was no more anxiety, no more panic, no more sleepless nights. She went in, the job itself did not bother her. She just was neutral about it. And she did the job. She made her financial goal. And I checked in with her 3 months after this particular session, and she still did not have any anxiety, any panic, any sleepless nights. It took care of the root of the issue. That's one example. Another example is a therapist who was working with a client who was very emotionally charged about a situation that had happened in the family. And so she knew that she couldn't get to use her other tools, her CBT and some other tools that she uses as a therapist, until she helped this patient self-regulate. She did the brains technique, and immediately the patient calmed down, and then she was able to effectively and efficiently use the tools that she had. And it's so quick, it can be done in a normal session and still have time to do everything else that you want to do with the client. Another example is with the hurricane. Here in North Carolina, where I live, last September, we had Hurricane Helene that devastated the Western North Carolina mountains. I worked for 4 months in treating first responders, volunteers, and those who had survived the hurricane. I had so many people who were so traumatized. And because it had happened right then and there, the brains technique in 10 minutes was able to bring them out of their trauma induced state into, okay, these are all the decisions I now have to make. I now have to find a place to live. I now have to make sure my kid gets to school and we have clothes and a roof over our head, and we have to call the insurance company, and all the massive decisions that have to be made when there's a natural disaster interrupt. I treated thousands of clients that way through the hurricane. The hurricane itself was a couple days, and the lasting impact is still affecting our community here as natural disasters do. I was also working with people with the LA fires as well in Los Angeles. It works really well for emergency situations as well, because if you can, as long as the person is safe and you work with the brains technique, it can help move them out of that trauma state so that they can function again and do all of the things that they need to do. So what's next? You can experience a session. I do one-on-one consults with people. You can learn the brains technique for personal use, and I'll show you that in a minute, or you can get certified. So the foundations course is the new course that I have just released last week. It is a self-paced course. It's 15 videos. It's about 3 to 4 hours of time. It's not a huge time crunch, and you can binge it in a weekend easily. and you will have quizzes and journaling prompts to help you integrate it. And the beauty of the self-paced course is you can do it in your own time. And for the first month at this time, I am giving 2 live support sessions for the first month that you sign up for the foundations course. You can go through the course. You may have questions. You come to the live session. We'll be doing demos and answering questions. And then you'll go back and practice and finish more of the course. A lot of people choose to stay with the monthly live sessions. And then you can also do that as well through the ongoing hub access. Now, if you're a professional or caregiver, if you're a teacher or a parent or a practitioner, a healthcare practitioner, then the certification program would be more appropriate. So we're going to include the foundations course in that. And that's a 12-week live training. It's 2 hours a week. And we're going to be doing a lot of practice to help you get confident in dealing with all sorts of situations. And you'll be a certified practitioner and be listed on my website as a certified practitioner for people who are looking in your area, or just you may have a specific expertise. I have certified practitioners of all different modalities. As a thank you, you will have a $50 thank you coupon code in your email box in the next 24 hours. And I do have another information session on July 1st at 7 p.m. And you can invite a friend or share with a practitioner that you have that if you would like to share the B.R.A.I.N.S technique with them. Here's my contact information for the brainstechnique.com. And I will state a medical disclaimer that the information and the B.R.A.I.N.S technique is for informational purposes only and not intended to diagnose, treat, or consult any medical condition. And that should be relied on with your medical provider. I am not a therapist. I am a licensed acupuncturist and certified brain health professional and trainer. And this is you use the B.R.A.I.N.S technique for acute stress that has happened within the last 4 months. Erica had just asked on the chat what happens after 4 months. After 4 months in the brain, if the acute stress is not taken care of in that 4 months, then it actually turns to post-traumatic stress disorder and it changes the blood flow more permanently in the brain. We want to get to things as they happen as quickly as possible. And that's the beauty of the B.R.A.I.N.S technique. Once you have it, you will be able to use it in all sorts of situations. I just had a situation where a family member called and was very irate and upset about something. And it triggered me from my childhood. And I thought, okay, before I even got off the phone, I started doing the B.R.A.I.N.S technique and was able to completely take care of it in the moment without having to let it sit and stew about, she said, I said, whatever. You could use it in all sorts of situations. Tasha asked, did I read something about essential oils? You do not need essential oils. The only thing you need for the B.R.A.I.N.S technique is your hands. I have worked with people all over the world on Zoom, and if you have an injury, shoulder or elbow or hand or anything, I have somebody else come in and do the bilateral tapping for them while I'm doing the session with them. There's always a way. You can use your feet. I prefer to use your hands on your thighs as during a session, but you don't need anything. You can do this in the wild. You can be in a camping trip, in a tent, a bear comes by, you're okay, and your adrenaline is still running. You can do it right then. You can do it in the middle of the night with your spouse next to you and not wake them up. That's how accessible it is. Courtney.
Hi, Whitney.
You bet.
Could you explain? I get the acute within the 4 months, but what if I'm just stressed out. I don't know what the event was, so I can't say if it was 4 months ago or ongoing. Like the woman who had the job and then she got increasingly more paralyzed. Didn't know it was job related. She just knew she was paralyzed. Could you describe that?
If you don't know, you can use it, and typically it'll get the brain flow enough where you're like, oh, this is what's bothering me. She didn't understand what it was about the job, but it was something in her psyche where all of a sudden she was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to do this for the rest of my life. And she was just paralyzed. And then every time she thought about it or was at work, that's when the panic and anxiety would start. And she mitigated that. And then she just was neutral. She was like, okay, going to do the job, going to go make some money. So you can use it.
Just and unfortunately, like everyday stress or the accumulation of our PTSD stuff.
With post-traumatic stress, we know what happens is when something happens that is sudden, distressing, and we feel isolated, when we feel alone and helpless. Those are the three criteria for when trauma is registered in the brain. When that happens, that is when we go into trauma mode, when we go into stress mode. When that happens, our brain takes a 360-degree snapshot of everything in the environment, utilizing all five of our senses. All of a sudden, if you're in a car accident, when you say a red car hits you, and all of a sudden now when you see red cars, whether you're driving or not, you're walking or driving, all of a sudden the red car, your heart starts racing and you're like, what the heck is going on? I don't understand what's happening. Your brain is trying to keep you safe, and it's a beautiful system. And as we have evolved as humans, we are not living in a place where we are technically being chased by tigers all the time, most of the time, most of us. And so we can use, if we know what that trigger is, if we're like, oh man, every time I see a red car, you can do a brains technique session on that red car. We don't use the brains technique after it's been there for 4 months to go back and take care of the entire situation because there's too many health factors that have begun, too many programs that have begun in GHK language that we may or may not want to resolve. That is,
What you described as those tracks. I remember
yes,
last night I was sitting at the couch and I'm like, why did my entire energy just shift? Why did I just become a little annoyed and sad? There must be a track, right? And I was thinking,
something.
oh, I would love to. It's one of the reasons I'm on the call. This would be a
Yes,
perfect the brain's technique. Yeah.
yes, that would be appropriate. You can use it.
Even though I didn't know what the track was, I could use it to identify the track.
You would eventually be able to, during the session, you'd be able to identify it. You could be like, I'm so stressed and I don't know what it is, and that's making me more stressed, and you could work with that.
Beautiful.
If somebody has post-traumatic stress, I highly recommend EMDR. That is the best thing that you can use because that goes back to the specific event and that mitigates, that takes care of and helps you process the entire event, meaning all of the triggers, that entire snapshot that got taken during that event. But if we're in the acute phase, if we're in that first 4 months, which is where the brains technique shines, you can use that and you can go back to that particular event. For the first 4 months of the hurricane, I was working with people and bringing them back into the event of the hurricane. Typically, if they were already feeling it, I didn't even have to bring them there. They were already living it day after day. And so once you use the brains technique in that situation, it helps to mitigate it. I had one woman who was going to Florida and was supposed to be going after the hurricane hit here in North Carolina. She was going to Florida and she was going to be on the ocean. And she was terrified of the water because her experience of the hurricane, the water came up into her apartment on the second floor. And so she was terrified of water and she wanted nothing to do with it. We did a brains technique on the entire event of her entire experience. And she went to Florida and she was like, oh, this is great. The ocean's great. Totally different situation. Erica had asked, and I know there's a couple of you here that know the GHK. GHK is Germanic healing knowledge or German new medicine, and it is a understanding of how the body processes trauma physically to get stronger for the next time that type of stressor were to occur. It is an understanding of the natural biology that is part of our system to get us stronger after something has occurred. The brains technique is really good for people who understand that process that understand that philosophy of German New Medicine, because if you know what the conflict is, you can immediately go into a brains technique session. You can use the brains technique, and I'll just speak for in this language for a minute. If you're in conflict activity, PCLA or PCLB phase, meaning you have physical symptoms of illness, and you can use it in any of those. The only time you don't use the brains technique is in the epicrisis. It works beautifully with people who know GHK. Is there anyone here that has not experienced the brains technique and that would like to try it? Okay, Erica? I would love for you all to stay on, but I would ask for everybody to turn their videos off while I'm working with Erica, just so she can focus on me and not be distracted. And then I'll ask you guys to put your videos back on afterwards. Typically takes anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Sometimes it can take a little bit longer. Hello, Miss Erica.
Hi, Whitney.
It's good to meet you.
It's good to meet you too. Thank you.
What has happened in the last 4 months that has been a trigger for you?
I live, like I wrote, I live in Israel. And as you might already know, like just a little over 2 weeks ago, we went into a escalated period of wartime here, where suddenly everything was just shut down. We were awakened in the middle of the night at 3 a.m. by sirens across the country. And then every day for a period of 12 days, we had at least 3 sirens with interceptions happening overhead, lots of booming. And even though it's an odd, unfortunate factor of living here that we're used to that, we had a long break where I live in the north, just under Lebanon. We had a ceasefire with Lebanon for 6 months. We worked back in a groove. And then boom, from out of nowhere, this just hit and it shut everything down and scrambled up everything, and everything, yeah, was shut down. We went into like big time sort of survival mode. As you might know, the ceasefire went into effect Tuesday night. So just a few days ago. Now it's like technically
Right.
quiet again, but it's a bit tenuous.
Is it the sound of the siren itself that I would imagine, can only imagine floods you, but you tell me what happens.
The sound of the siren is very jarring, but what they did this time, because they were technically from Iran and long range missiles, so they had like time in advance to warn us. They hacked into everyone's phones, and a warning, emergency warning, came up on all phones like within 10 minutes before the sirens would be activated. It was, on the one hand, it was better than just being thrust up from the sirens, but it also was jarring in its own way.
Okay. When you think about on a scale of 1 to 10, when you think about the intensity of the warning on the phone, how intense is that?
About a 4.
Okay. And how intense is it when you hear the siren?
Ooh, a 7 or 8.
What we'll do is we'll bring in both. And I just want to say I'm so sorry that you're having to live like that. I know our hearts are with you. There's no words. So let's see if we can get you some relief so that your brain is still going to respond. We need your brain to respond when the sirens go off, right? We need your brain to go, okay, we need to go do this and this. Do you have a place that you go to?
There's a safety room in the house, which is also my younger daughter's bedroom. So it's fairly comfortable in there. And actually, that was one of the, if you can call it, an odd benefit of having this advance warning. For the first 13 months of the war, there was no warning. And because we're 9 kilometers from Lebanon, when the sirens went off, we had 15 seconds to get to shelter. And sometimes I saw things falling around me, which kind of sucked. Now it's a little bit more calm because we're given advance notice. We can actually use the toilet, finish doing something we're in the middle of, and then take our time to get into the shelter and then close the door once we hear the sirens starting.
Okay. And just when you learn the brain's technique, you can then use it while you're sitting in shelter, and you can use it for your child as well, depending on how, how I would imagine each time is a little bit different, depending on how you've slept, how you've eaten, what your stress level is when this goes off, of whether it sends you into a full out, blown out, or if you're like, okay, I can handle this. You can use the brain's technique in the moment as well. Okay, so I'm going to have you. Are you sitting with your legs on the ground? I don't want you cross-legged. So if you're on
Okay.
the bed, that's fine, or on a couch or something, that's totally fine.
Do I need both of my hands free? Because then I'll
Yes.
put the phone somewhere.
Okay. I want you to just go ahead and take a deep breath. I want you to place your right hand on your right thigh and your left hand on your left thigh. And if you just open your eyes for a minute, you can close them again in a minute. I just want you to think about the real estate of your hand. I want you to use, if this is your thigh and this is your hand, I want you to use your whole hand when you're tapping on your thigh. I don't want you just tapping like that. I want you to come up. You don't have to come up far, but a couple inches. Think about the more contact that you have with your hand, when you tap on the right side on your right leg, then there's more blood flow happening in your left hemisphere and vice versa. The more contact is better. I will walk you through all this. You don't have to remember anything, but I'm going to walk you through a certain type of pacing with certain focuses. And it is going to be challenging and hard for these first couple minutes, but I promise you we will get to the other side of this and you will feel relief. Just stay with me. If you need to cry or scream in your head and cry, whatever needs to happen. I'm going to have you go ahead and put your right hand on your right thigh, left hand on your left thigh. This first part, we're going to be tapping quickly. So the pacing is going to be right, left, 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 left. So it's going to be fast tapping. And I'm going to have you keep that tapping. And I don't want you to stop tapping until I specifically say in about 5 to 10 minutes, Erica, stop tapping. So keep tapping. You can close your eyes now if you'd like, if it feels safe to do. And so I want you to think about when you hear the siren. And I want you to, if you want to see the emergency warning on your phone and then the siren going off. And I want you to hear the siren, hear the shuffling around you, the noises around you, and know that you've got to get to safety. And I want you to allow your worst case fears to come up when the siren goes off, and just allow that to come up. And just for a couple minutes, so for 2.5 minutes, I'm going to allow you to process that. And then I'm going to check back in with you and I'll be quiet for 2.5 minutes. And Erica, keep tapping quickly. When you think about the sirens going off, what level of intensity does that feel like for you? Okay. So I'm just going to let you go for just another 30 seconds or so. And just allow yourself to hear the sirens and hear the noises around you, and allow the worst case scenario to come up. And I'll be quiet actually for 1 more minute. And I'll check back in. And Erica, keep tapping quickly. When you think about the sirens going off around you and having to get to shelter immediately, what level of intensity does that feel like for you? I'm sorry?
1.
A 1? Okay. So I'm going to have you go ahead and start tapping slowly. So the pacing is going to be right, left, left, left. And just allow yourself to feel the relief. You can raise your shoulders up and release them. You can visualize your cells that have been constricted since the last siren has gone off, to that your cells are constricted and tight. Visualize them opening up fully, and the fluids in your body opening and flowing beautifully in your body. The blood system, the lymph system, your body knows what to do and how to take care of yourself. and just allow yourself to stay in the relief. What I would offer is to visualize a balloon to come up and swallow everything that you were just thinking and feeling about. And you can let go of the string and allow that to go into the ethers and just stay in your body, stay in the relief. And for the next 2.5 minutes, I don't want you to think about anything. I don't want your brain on. I don't want you to try to figure anything out. I just want you to stay in the relief that your system feels. And I will be quiet for 2.5 minutes. And Erica, you can keep tapping slowly. And when you think about the sirens going off, what level of intensity does that feel like for you?
Right now it's 0.
So you can, Erica, you can stop tapping and you can take a deep breath and release it. When you're ready, you can open your eyes. Yeah, that was a lot of hard work. So in the last 2.5 minutes, when you were slow tapping, was there any new thoughts or perspectives about the sirens or about the situation?
Something weird that happened. There was some kind of a siren, like a police siren for one moment, which never happens because I live in a small country village. And
Uh-huh.
so I don't know if it was the television, but I heard it and it didn't startle me in any way.
Okay.
So that was strange and interesting.
Yeah.
I did feel one other like little wave of release of tears during that slow time, but
Yeah.
it's just small tears. But other than that, yeah, I could then be aware of how much tension my body has been holding.
Yeah.
And seeing now, I actually went today for an acupuncture and cupping treatment. So this is coming after that.
Yeah.
So I
Good.
can feel my body is now beginning to allow relaxation and allow
Yeah.
to let go.
Yeah. And so the siren is information. And as you stay calm and move, you can take care of yourself. Yeah. So over the next 24, so three different invitations I have for you. One is over the next half hour or so, any stretching, anything you can do with your five senses, stretching or singing or dancing or essential oils or a cup of tea or something like that. Or if you have a fuzzy blanket, you can touch the fuzzy blanket. Anything with your five senses you can do in the next half hour or so, just to keep you in your body. And then my invitation over the next 24 hours is to be open to new thoughts and new perspectives about the situation, and especially in relation to the sirens. So there might be a conversation you have, or something you read in a book, or listen to a podcast, or listen to a song on the radio, or something like that. You now have full blood flow here in your prefrontal cortex, where it allows for compassion and empathy for you and for others. And you will have new thoughts and perspectives of, oh, I didn't think about that, or I didn't think about it that way. So just be on the lookout for that. And for the validation that you will have continued validation in your environment, that when this goes off, that you know what to do to take care of yourself and your family.
Thank you so much, Whitney.
Yeah, you're welcome. I will, as part of the session, I will email you tomorrow and check in and see how you're doing. I always do a follow-up the next day. Thank you for being willing and being brave and courageous to do this, especially in such an intense situation, and to do this over Zoom with strangers. So thank you. Yeah. And everybody can turn their videos back on. And if anybody has any questions or any particular situations that you have questions, if the technique can help with, or anything about the foundations course, the self-paced course for anybody to take, or the certification course for the professionals or caretakers. Courtney.
My question, I guess this is more of the science, Whitney, is you said to Erica that she'll now have with the blood flow to her prefrontal cortex that allow for compassion herself and others. Can you tell us more about compassion as a key to new perspectives?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Good question. When we are in trauma or stress response, our blood flow is stuck in our amygdala and in our hypothalamus. And so we're super reactive. We're irritable, we're anxious, we're angry, we're super reactive. So we're not always the greatest person to be around that we don't want to be around or others. The blood flow is stuck here. When that happens, there's not a lot of blood flow here in the prefrontal cortex. Bilateral stimulation in that certain pacing and sequence actually gets your blood flow here in your prefrontal cortex. Now you're not just, there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem. And then you're just like, or when anybody asks you anything, because you're like, there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem. When we move our blood flow in our brain and we now have blood flow everywhere, especially in the prefrontal cortex, now we have compassion for ourselves and the capacity to have compassion for others. If we're in an argument with somebody else, we cannot see their point of view. It is not possible because we're like, there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem. And that's all we have access to. But once we do the B.R.A.I.N.S technique, we're like, oh, I could see how that person feels that way. And that's why it's so good for relationships too, because now we can be present. We can have compassion and empathy for ourselves and for others. And our relationships can actually improve because we're able to be present. We cannot hear somebody else's perspective if we are just feeling the emotion of something. We're in it. The chemicals are all in our brain and we're just like, rah, we want to bite somebody's head off. Once we get that blood flow moving, that's why the bilateral tapping is in that sequence is so good for that, as it increases blood flow to give us compassion. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's a really beautiful, to me, a beautiful compassion and empathy as the chop wood carry water steps,
Yeah.
being able to see another point of view, as you said.
Yeah. Doesn't
Yeah,
mean
I've never thought that, and I can reflect on the times that I felt more ardent about my point of view, and you're like, oh, yeah, it's just kind of me mode.
because you're in that survival, you're in that fight or flight. And so as long as you're safe and you do that and you're able to then have access, then there's possibilities and there's potential
Yeah.
and that's why it helps with creativity. Because if you're stuck on a problem and you can't see a solution, because you're focusing, there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem, and you don't have access to anything else. And so once you get that blood flow there, it changes everything.
I think that the compassion part is really beautiful. Thank you. I'm thinking of children, like when my kids were little. Yeah, you're right. You get them to, when they're in a state of compassion, then everything's easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. That was really
Yeah.
an empathy. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. Anything else? Everybody else can turn on their videos if they like, or they can just ask the question. I'm fine with that too. Okay. So thank you all. Thank you, Erica, for taking time to be with us and for being willing and courageous to share your experience. We are all with you, I know. Yeah. And if you all ever have any questions or anything, I'll be sending out an email. So the Foundations program, if you want to learn that for yourself. And when you learn it for yourself, you can use it for your kids and your pets. You'll be able to use it for some situations. But if you really want to really understand it and practice it and be proficient at it, I would recommend the certification course, or if you're a practitioner. I would love to somehow get this to the world where I could just send it out for free, the Foundations course, so that everybody could have it. I walk outside and there's somebody upset on the street. I can't tell you how many times I have done this with strangers on the street when they've been totally distressed. I had one person in my neighborhood walk out and they're like, we have to put our dog down and I don't know what I'm going to do. Just was totally freaked out. I said, do you want some relief? And she was like, yeah. And I said, do you have 10 minutes? She's yes. And so she came and she sat down and we did it. She was able to make the decisions that she needed to make for her and her family and prepare and do everything that needed to happen. I use it all the time. It's invaluable. Have a beautiful day, everybody. And let me know if you have any questions. Just get in contact. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.